Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. A very warm welcome. This Monday morning Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam discussion, Monday, 12th December 2022. And we are going to read from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 5, entitled The Cause of All Causes, Text 14. Before we discuss on this verse, let's sing Jai Radha Madhav. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Gopijana Vallabha Girivara Dhari, Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Radha Govinda, Shri Radhe. Jai Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jai Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Nitai Sachinandana Gaura Hari, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaura Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakacarya Ashtotra Shatashri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavavrinda Ki Jai. नामाचार्य श्रीला हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय, मथुरा धाम की जय, मायापुर धाम की जय, जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय, गंगा माई की जय, यमुना माई की जय, तुलसी देवी की जय, भक्ति देवी की जय, सामवेद भक्तवृंद की जय। All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyate Deshatarine Sarvam Shri Krishna Arpanamastu Krishne Matirastu. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevāya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevāya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevāya. Today we are reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation, Chapter 5, entitled The Cause of All Causes, Text 14. Dravyaṁ karma ca kālaś svabhāvo jīva eva ca vāsudevāt paro brahman na cānyo rtho tattvataḥ. Dravyaṁ karma ca kālaś svabhāvo jīva eva ca vāsudevāt paro brahman na cānyo rtho tattvataḥ. Dravyam karma ca kālaś svabhāvo jīva eva ca vāsudevāt paro brahman na cānyo rtho tattvataḥ. Word by word, dravyam, the ingredients, earth, water, fire, air, and sky. Karma, the interaction. Cha, and. Kālaḥ, eternal time. Cha, also. Svabhāvo, intuition or nature. Jīva, the living being. Eva, certainly. Cha, and. Vāsudevāt, from Vāsudeva. Parah, differentiated parts. Brahman, O Brahmana. Na, never. Cha, also. Anyah, separate. Rtho, value. Asti, there is. Tattvataḥ, in truth. Translation. The 5 elementary ingredients of creation, the interaction thereof set up by eternal time, and the intuition or nature of the individual living beings are all differentiated parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vāsudeva, and in truth, there is no other value in them. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. The phenomenal world is impersonally the representation of Vāsudeva, because the ingredients of its creation, their interaction, and the enjoyer of the resultant action, the living being, are all produced by the external and internal energies of Lord Krishna. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 7.4 and 5. The ingredients, namely earth, water, fire, air, and sky, as well as the conception of material identity, intelligence, and the mind, are produced of the external energy of the Lord. The living entity who enjoys the interaction of the above gross and subtle ingredients, as set up by eternal time, is an offshoot of internal potency, with freedom to remain either in the material world or in the spiritual world. In the material world, the living entity is enticed by deluding nations, but in the spiritual world, he is in the normal condition of spiritual existence without any delusion. The living entity is known as the marginal potency of the Lord. But in all circumstances, neither the material ingredients nor the spiritual parts and parcels are independent of the personality of Godhead Vāsudeva. For all things, whether products of external, internal, or marginal potencies of the Lord, are simply displays of the same effulgence of the Lord. Just as light, heat, and smoke are displays of fire. None of them is separate from the fire. all of them combine together to be called fire. Similarly, all phenomenal manifestations, as well as the effulgence of the body of Vāsudeva, are his impersonal features, whereas he eternally exists in his transcendental form called Satchidananda Vigraha, distinct from all conceptions of the material ingredients mentioned above. Before we discuss on this verse, let us offer some prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Namashreshtham Manamapi Shachiputram Matra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Murupurim Mathurim Goshthavati Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Adadandastranam Dante Idam Yachaha Punaha Punaha Shriman Rupa Padambhojam Dhulisyam Janma Janmani He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text 14. Dravyaṁ karma cha kālaścha svabhāvo jīva eva cha vāsudevāt paro brahman na cānyo rtho tattvataḥ. The 5 elementary ingredients of creation, the interaction thereof set up by eternal time, and the intuition or nature of the individual living beings are all differentiated parts and parcels of the personality of Godhead, Vāsudeva, and in truth, there is no other value in them. If we try and understand the last sentence or the last part of this verse, na cānyo rtho tattvataḥ, there is no other real meaning in anything else other than the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Na cānyo rtho tattvataḥ. So this is the transcendental position of everything that is created from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, aham sarvasya prabho mattah sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. So Krishna mentions that everything is emanating from me, aham sarvasya prabho. And when someone knows this in truth, iti matva aham sarvasya matta sarvam pravartate iti matva, when someone knows this, bhajante mam, one engages in loving devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. How does one engage? With full emotions, bhava samanvita. And who is such a person? Buddha. Such a person is a very intelligent person. This is the conclusion of all the Vedic literatures. Vedesha sarver ahameva vedyo. If we look at the end of all the Vedas. What is the conclusion of the Vedas is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead and to surrender onto Him. If one does not do that, then unfortunately it is Shrama eva hi kevalam. It is very beautifully mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Dharma swanushtita pumsam vishvakshena kathasuya notpadeyet ratim yadi shrama eva hi kevalam. Very beautifully mentioned that someone could be rendering religious activities very nicely. Swa anushtita. So dharma is the religious activities that can be performed in the human form of life. And one could be doing those religious activities very nicely. Swa anushtita. Pumsa. The people could be executing their religious activities very nicely. Vishvakshena kathasuya notpadiyad ritim yadi. But if one is not developing attachment to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, ratim. Rati is attachment. So if one is not, what Vishvakshena kathasu, Krishna katha, if one is not developing attachment to hear about Krishna, then it is Shrama eva hi kevalam. It is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. That then, if that is not done, then it is just a hard labor. Because the goal of human form of life is to render loving devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And how is the loving devotional service rendered? Shravanadhi shuddha chitte karayodaya. When one is hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our natural propensity of loving attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is automatically revealed. So Srila Prahlad Maharaj mentions how one can render loving devotional service to the Lord in 9 different ways. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnum, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. Iti pumsarpita Vishnu bhakti chet navalakshana kriyeta bhagavati adha tanmanye aditam uttamam. So Srila Prahlad Maharaj mentions what are the different types of devotional service that one can get engaged in. It starts with Shravanam, hearing about the Lord. So when he's hearing about the Lord, then one can talk about the Lord, Kirtanam. When one is hearing and talking about the Lord, then one can remember the Lord, Smaranam. When one is hearing, talking, and remembering the Lord, then Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. One can actually render loving devotional service in terms of the service to the lotus feet of the Lord. Padasevanam. Then one is offering flowers to the Lord, Archanam. Then one is offering prayers to the Lord, Vandanam. Then one can become the servant of the Lord, Dasyam. One can become the friend of the Lord, Sakyam. And then Atmanivedanam. One can totally surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, 100% surrender of everything. So this is the transcendental position in devotional service. That comes with understanding that everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yatkincham jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitha ma gridha kasya sviddhanam. Om purnamadaha purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnam evavashishyate. This is an invocation prayer in Sri Upanishad, where it is mentioned that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Purna. Purna means complete. He is complete in himself. And from the complete is emanating. Everything is complete. Incomplete cannot emanate from the complete. So Purna Madaha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is complete and full and whole. And whatever is emanating, Purna Madaha, Purna Midam, whatever is existing here is complete in itself. Whatever is emanating from him is complete in itself. If we look at the innumerable spiritual and material worlds that is emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are complete in itself. If we look at one particular atom, one electron, one neutron, it is complete in itself. So this is Andantarastam Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamam Bhajami. Ekopi asau rachaitam jagadanda kotim yat shaktirasti jagadandataya yajanta andantarastham paramanu chayantarastham govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami. That is mentioned in Brahma Samhita by Lord Brahma, that Krishna is one, ekopi asau rachaitam jagadanda kotim. But he is creating these innumerable universes. Jagadanda kotim. Yat shaktirasti andataya yadanta. Andantarastham paramanu chayantarastham. So Krishna is maintaining each and every universe. And then he is present in the nucleus of every atom. So we talk about this nuclear energy. Who is the source of this nuclear energy? The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nothing can exist independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything is dependent. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself is independent. Swarat. So that is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Janmadya asya yataha anvayad itaratascha artheshu abhigna swarat. So he is independent. So everything is emanating from the Janmadya asya yataha. So that is the first few words in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is saying that everything is emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Janmadya asya yataha. Anvayad itaratascha artheshu abhigna swarat. So Krishna knows everything, whatever is going on across the whole universe. There are innumerable universes, spiritual and material, and Krishna knows directly and indirectly what is going on in each and every nucleus of the atoms present in those innumerable spiritual and material universes. And he is independent. This is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Aishwaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashasa shriya jnana vairagya shriya sanna iti bhaga iti gana. It is mentioned by Parashara Muni, who is the father of Veda Vyasa. He mentions that who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Supreme Personality of Godhead is someone who has got 6 Shad Aishwarya Purna. So he has got six of the opulences in 100%. So Aishwaryasya samagrasya viryasya. So he has got total riches. He has got total strength. He has got total fame. Viryasya yasha shriya. He has got total beauty. Jnana and vairagya. He has got knowledge and renunciation. So these are the six different opulences are in full, and that is Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the most important part here we see is, even though he has got everything else in full, he has got riches in full, he has got beauty in full, he has got strength in full, he has got fame in full, he has got knowledge in full, but along with all those wonderful 5 qualities, he's got renunciation in full as well. So even though he possesses everything in full, he does not get attached to anything because he has got 100% renunciation. This is the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That he, even though he is the owner of everything, bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram, suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shanti mruchati. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that he is actually the enjoyer of all the sacrifices and penances done by everyone. He is actually the proprietor of everything in the whole universe, innumerable universes. Sarvaloka maheshwaram, suhridam sarvabhutanam. He is the best friend of all the living entities. When one knows these 3 things, gyatva mam shanti mruchati, one attains real peace. This is the formula for peace. When one understands that the actual enjoyer is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the actual proprietor is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the actual friend is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one understands this, how we can know that? We can know that because, as Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, bhumir apa analo vayu kham mana buddhirevacha ahankaram itiyam me bhinna prakritir ashtadha. So this is what Srila Prabhupada quotes in the purport, mentions about. So Krishna mentions about his 8 separated energies: the earth, water, fire, air, space or ether, and then mind, intelligence, and false ego. So there are these gross energies, and then there are these subtle energies. But everything is emanating from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the earth, water, fire, air, and ether or the sky. And if you look at each of those elements, the grossness decreases and the subtlety increases for each of these elements: earth, water, fire, air. So fire, if you look at earth, it has got all the it can be felt, it can be you can touch it and everything else. Then water does not have solid form, but still you can touch it and feel it. Earth, water, fire has got a form, but if you try to touch it, then you get burned. Then air, you cannot see it, but it exists. We know it exists. Then space, everything is existing in space. So the subtlety keeps on increasing. And then there is mind, intelligence, and false ego. Again, the subtlety is increasing in that order. So the mind is the place where all the thoughts and all the impressions of chitta. So there is this chitta which stores all the impressions that we are having. Every second of every experience that we have gets stored. It's like there is no, if you look at it from the context of the current storage that we use for we talk about the cloud storage and different types of storages where we have terabytes and petabytes. So this is like unlimited storage. So we talk about the unlimited usage of the internet, things like that. So this is like unlimited storage that we have, the chitta, and it is storing every second of our experience. And then that is a subtle body. And because all our experiences are stored, our thoughts are based on those experiences that we have had. And that is the reason why when one living entity is taking birth in a new body, they have these. Sometimes we see that some of these people, even when they are extremely small, they might have some great talents. How is this explained for? Because that is being stored in their so whatever experiences that they had and whatever talents that they had is getting stored. But all those talents are, at the end of the day, it is a material storage of everything, which is not, unfortunately, going to help one to come out of the cycle of birth and death. So what is happening in this material universe is that the living entity is taking birth after birth since time immemorial. Ei rupe brahmanda brahmite kono bhagyavan jiv Guru Krishna prasada paya bhakti lata beach. As it is mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the living entity is taking birth in different species of life in different planetary systems. Like there is no anadi bahirmukha jiv Krishna bhuli gela atev Krishna ved puran karela. It is called anadi bahirmukha jiv. So we don't know when this started. This transmigration from one body to another, when it started. Anadi bahirmukha jiv. So bahirmukha. Bahirmukha means one is keeping one's face away from Krishna. Instead of going towards Krishna, one is going away from Krishna. So this is unfortunately the situation of the conditioned living entities in this material universe. They are anadi bahirmukha. Since time immemorial, we don't know when it began. They're making their face away from Krishna. So somehow or other, if they look at Krishna, they will get attracted to Krishna. And they will realize that I was never away from Krishna. This is a wonderful state of spiritual realization in Krishna consciousness. That one can be sure that one is never separate from the Lord. That separation from the Lord is based on ignorance. Once the ignorance goes away, one knows that there was no separation at all. So this is the That is why preme bhakti yahan hote avidya vinashe yate. It is mentioned in that in the Guru Vandana prayer that when we have this loving devotional service to Krishna, prema bhakti, when there is prema bhakti, that loving avidya vinashe, the ignorance gets destroyed. So it is the ignorance which is causing the living entity to think that they are separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna actually mentions mama eva amsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanātana manaha shashtani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. So Krishna says that every living entity in this whole innumerable universes are my part and parcel. So they are eternally part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At no point in time they are separate. But what happens? Manaha shashtani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. When one identifies oneself with the material mind and the five senses, then there is the struggle in the material universe. The struggle is happening because one thinks that I am this body, I am this mind, I am this five senses that I have. If one starts, and that is the conditioned state of existence. So we were talking about this 8 separated energies of the Lord: earth, water, fire, air, ether or sky, and then mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then Krishna says, apareyam itastu anyam viddhime prakritim param jīva bhūtam mahābhāho yayedam dhārete jagat. So Krishna mentions that. So those are my inferior energies, and then I have my superior energy. Krishna says, apareyam itastu anyam viddhime prakritim param. So there is a superior energy. Who is that? Jīva bhūtam mahābhāho yayedam dhārete jagat. That is the living entity. So it is the living entities who are conscious. So it is a consciousness that helps the living entity to acquire knowledge. Whatever knowledge we acquire from our senses, jnanendriya, karmendriya, whatever activities we do through our senses, how are we able to do it? We are able to do it because there is consciousness within us. It is a consciousness that causes us to gain knowledge. And it is a consciousness that causes us to perform our activities. So that is Jiva Bhuta. The living entities who have that consciousness within them. And it is this consciousness that is causing the living entity to go through the 6 kinds of changes that happen in the living entities. So it takes birth, it grows, it stays for some time, it reproduces, and then it dwindles, and then it vanishes. So they're called six different types of changes that happen in the living entities. What is the reason that these 6 kinds of changes happen? It is because there is consciousness that is present in the living entities. If the consciousness is not there, say for example, unfortunately there is stillborn. Someone is born. Why is it called stillborn, for example? Still. What is the reason they are still? Because that presence of consciousness is not there. And that's why they're stillborn. Someone is unfortunately in that situation. And because that is consciousness is not there, there is no growth. So there is no staying, there is no reproducing, there is nothing is happening if consciousness is not there. But if consciousness is present, that is Jiva Bhuta. Mahabhaho yayedam dharyate jagat. And in the Jiva Bhuta, in the living entities, the significance of human form of life is utmost. Nrideha madhyam sulabham sudurlabham plavam sukalpam guru karna dharam mayanukulena nabhasvate ritam puman bhavadbhiya nataret sa atmaha. So it is mentioned that if one gets this human form of life, which is sulabham in the sense that it is in this form of life, the Supreme Personality of Godhead can be attained in the most easy way. That's why it is sulabha, very easy in terms of attaining the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But it is sudurlabham. It is extremely rare, very rare. Nrideham Adyam Sulabham Sudurlabham, and it is like a plavam sukalpam Guru Karna Dharam. It is like a boat or a ship, and the Guru or the spiritual master is the captain of the ship. And then Krishna is sending the favorable winds in the direction so that we cross over this ocean of birth and death. Mayanu kolena nabhasvateritam puman bhavadbhyana tarets atmaha. And in this case, with all these wonderful situation that is provided in order to cross the ocean of birth and death, if one does not cross this ocean of birth and death, then unfortunately one is atmaha. One is unfortunately not utilizing this wonderful opportunity. So this is what is mentioned in the scriptures. So this is what is mentioned. If you look at the first line of this verse, dravyaṁ karma cha kālaś. So dravyaṁ is the ingredients, the 5 ingredients, which are the gross ingredients. Karma, the interaction between the living entity and the ingredients. So as we said, apareyam itastu anyam vidhime prakritim param jīva bhutam mahabāho yayedam dharyate jagat. So the living entities are using these energies, dravyaṁ, in order to continue the existence in that particular form of body. So this dravya and karma and kala is the eternal time. So here basically Srila Prabhupada mentions in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, when the introduction is being given, there is Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala and Karma. So there are these 5 different main entities in this whole universe. So the first is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything emanates. Janmadhyasya yataha, as we mentioned. Then we have the Prakriti. The Prakriti is the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we have the para Prakriti and apara Prakriti, as we were mentioning, the superior energy, which is the living entities, and the inferior energy, which are the 5 gross and the 3 subtle ingredients. The 3 subtle is mind, intelligence, and false ego. And the false ego is what is the basis of ignorance for the conditioned living entities. Because of the presence of the false ego, the living entity thinks that the living entity is this particular body, which one has got in this particular birth. So ahankara vimudhatma karta ham iti manyate prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma karta ham iti manyate. As Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that actually all the work is being done by the modes of material nature, prakriti. So there is sattva, which is the mode of goodness, then rajoguna, which is the mode of passion, and then there is tamoguna, which is the mode of ignorance. So it is these modes that are acting on the conditioned living entity. So if one is in the mode of goodness, sattvat sanjayate jnanam. So one is inclined to understand one's constitutional position. That is the real mode of goodness, where one understands that I am not this external changing thing. I am what is within this. Dehi nosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tatha dehantaram prapti dhiras tatrana mohyati. So there is a proprietor of the body within the body, because of which there is this childhood, youth, and old age. This progression, as we mentioned, the growth is taking place. Tatha dehantaram prapti. So just like the child is transforming to youth, the youth is transforming to old. Similarly, after the old age, one is taking up the new body. So dhiras tatrana mohyati. A sober person is not bewildered by these changes that happen. This is the transcendental truth, which helps one to be in that real state of existence, which is free from all this constant trials and tribulations that happen in the conditioned world. Therefore, Krishna mentions dukkhalayam ashashvatam. Mamupetya punarjanmam dukkhalayam ashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gata. So this material world is called an abode of misery. Why? Because there is janma, mrityu, jara, vyadhi. So unfortunately, the misery is starting from when one takes birth in the material world. And therefore, when one comes out of this cycle of birth and death in this material world, one is in that state of liberation. So that liberation is the state where iha yasya harer dasya karmana manasagira nikilasvapi avasthasu jivan mukta sauchyate. When so liberation, there are these transcendental personalities like Srila Prabhupada himself. They show how the person can be liberated even while being in this conditioned existence in this material world. How that is when one is 100% surrendered onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Hare Dasya. How one is surrendered? Karmana Manasa Gira. 3 ways. Through the activities, through the mind, and through the speech. If one is surrendered 100%, Nikilasvapi avasthasu jivan mukta sauchyate. One might be in this conditioned world, but one is still in a liberated state. This is what this transcendental understanding is. So we see dravya karmam cha kālaś svabhāvo jīva evacha. The 5 elementary ingredients of creation, the interaction thereof set up by eternal time, and the intuition or nature of the individual living beings. So these are the 3 different entities that are described here. The svabhāvo jīva evacha. So that is really important. The nature. Svabhāva niyatam karma. Kurvan apnoti kilbisham. Niyatam kuru karmatvam karma jyayo hi akarmana. So as Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, that this svabhava is one's own nature. So if one is if we see in the battle of Kurukshetra, for example, Arjuna did not want to fight, and he was giving very valid reasons to Krishna why he should not be fighting with his own relatives for a kingdom. Nahi prapashyami mamapanudya yachosha avapma bhumau asapatna riddham rajyam suranam apichadipatyam. So Arjuna was saying that yachosham uchoshana indriyanam. So he was saying that what will I do? I might actually get all this kingdom, but if I don't have my own relatives with whom I can stay with, then what is the use of this all winning at the cost of killing my own relatives? So then Krishna mentions that Arjuna is a kshatriya, and the actual activity that a kshatriya should do is to fight in the battlefield, and that was an opportunity that came in. It was not that he actually sought that opportunity as such. Like Krishna tried in several different ways to stop the battle of Kurukshetra. He personally went as a peace messenger of the Pandavas, and he requested that just give 5 villages to the Pandavas, to Duryodhana. And then Duryodhana, in his arrogance, said that I will not even give a land worth the tip of the needle. So that was like the last straw in the camel's back, as they say. When Duryodhana said that, then there was no other alternative except that war. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsava mamaka pandavascheva kim akurvata sanjaya. So then Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya what is happening in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and what is that Dharma kshetra? It is called Dharma kshetra. Dharma is, so this is svabhava, as it is mentioned in the nature. So that is dharma. Dharma is svabhava. Dharma, like Srila Prabhupada gives the example of dharma as the dharma or the natural characteristic of, for example, the sugar is to give sweetness. So the natural characteristic of the chili is to give that hot taste in the tongue. So this is the natural characteristic of water is to flow, for example. So this is a different natural. That is the dharma. So one has got this one's own natural activities that one has to perform. So when one is not in that state of performing the natural activities as one has got in that conditioned state of existence, then one is in a path that is not for that particular frame of physiology and psychology. And if one is not doing the work that one has got in that physiology and psychology, one will feel that one is not in a proper state of mind. So this is the there is this verse where it is said that every activity has got its own negatives and positives. There is nothing. There is no activity where one is free from the reactions that come from those activities. The reaction is always there in this conditioned state of existence. So this is svabhāvo niyatam karma kurvan apnoti kilbisham. So what Krishna says is that in Bhagavad Gita, if one is doing one's activities that is ordained according to one's nature, then when one is engaged in that activity, one is not generating sinful reactions, because that has been ordained as a natural instinctive activity that one is ordained to do. So one is just following that ordained activity. But if one is trying to move away from that, in the psychophysiological condition itself will make that person feel that I am not in the right space. This is what is so paramatmeti chitta apiyukto dehesmin purusha para upadrashta anumanta cha bharta bhokta maheshwara. So Krishna is present in the form of the super soul. He is overseeing all the activities, and then he is giving the permission as well. So if a living entity has got to do one type of activity, and in the mind he wants to do another type of activity, naturally he is inclined for one activity, but he forcefully wants to go and do another activity. Yeah, so what is it doing? He is trying to go away from his natural path to an artificial path. So when one wants forcefully go into the artificial path, the Paramatma within will say that this is not your natural path. You're going in an artificial path. But if the living entity forces oneself to go in the artificial path, Krishna gives the permission. Krishna says, okay, if you're so much adamant that you want to do this, okay, go and do it. But this is the wonderful state of the transcendental position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So actually, if he wants, he can control each and every movement of each and every living entity in this universe. But what happens if someone does that? When there is force, there is no loving reciprocation. And that is what the Lord doesn't want. So he doesn't want, of course, when a living entity surrenders, yasyaham anugrahanami harishyet dhanam shane. Tato dhanam tyajanti asya dukkha dukhitam, swajana dukkha dukhitam. But if someone has got that costless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and surrenders onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then the Supreme Personality of Godhead actually takes control of that living entity. Because the living entity says that I want to be controlled by you, O Lord. So this is a transcendental position of someone who has surrendered onto the Lord. The Lord then takes. So there's this Tepisha Tantra Urudamni Badhya. It is mentioned by Srila Prahlad Maharaj. Andhaya Thandaya Upaniyamana Tepisha Tantra Urudamni Badhya. Nate Vidu Swartagatim Hi Vishnu Durashaye Bahirarthamanina. So one, unfortunately, in the conditioned state of existence, one does not know that one's actual benefit and actual destination is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna or Vishnu. Nate vidu swa artha gati. Swa-artha is the actual self-interest, and actual goal or destination is Krishna himself, Vishnu. Why? Because durashayaye bahirarthamanina. Because when one thinks that I am this external body, this external senses, this external mind, then it becomes durasha. It becomes a wrong hope, a hope that is not going to give one's original bliss, because original bliss is always present within. One does not, when one goes outside, it is like it is hopelessness. One becomes hopeless, durasha. Why one becomes hopeless? Because every time one experiences some new sensation or anything that gives a little bit of pleasure, that doesn't last forever. So yehi sansparshaja bhoga dukkha yona evate adyantamanta kaunteya na teshu ramate buddha. As it is mentioned by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, that whatever things, the sense and the sense objects, the interaction between the sense and the sense objects, whatever pleasure or pain it gives, actually initially it feels that it is pleasure, but actually it is dukkha yonaya. It is the womb of pain. The so-called temporary pleasure is a womb of pain. Why? Because it's just kshana bhangur. There is a word in Sanskrit called kshana bhangur. What does it mean? Kshana bhangur means it is existing for a very temporary amount of time, just a secondary sensation, and then it's gone. So one, but to experience that sensation, again one goes out to experience. Again, that is only for a short period, and again it is causing a lot of sorrow. If one goes to the extreme of this so-called external pleasure, why does one go for getting intoxicated, for example? Because that intoxication is giving a certain type of pleasure for a certain amount of time to the senses, external senses. But what it is causing in the end, it is causing a huge grief in the end. That is dukkha yonaya. So even we talk about intoxication, even if we talk about, for example, even the normal, one is having the family. So deha patya kalatradishu atma sainyeshu asatsu api tesham pramatta nidanam pashyanapi na pashyati. As it is mentioned in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, that all this, even that is a dukkha yonaya. It's a womb of pain. Deha patya kalatradishu. So one is having through the body, deha patya kalatradishu atma sainyeshu. So one is having this expansion through the family. One is thinking that these are all my infallible soldiers. But tesham pramatta nidhanam pashyanapi na pashyati. So this is a position where, because at the end of the day, this material world is a place where because one takes birth, one has to die. And between the birth and death, there is disease and old age. So one cannot escape. So if one wants to take birth in the material world, then one has to accept the fact that there will be death. And one also has to accept the fact that there will be disease and old age in between. So this is the nature of this material world. So how does one come out of this material world? When one understands that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental. So tepisha tantra urudamni badhya, as we said. So one is under the control, either way one is under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Either one is controlled through the energy, the material energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or one is under control of the spiritual energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is what Srila Prabhupada mentions here. The living entity is marginal energy, marginal, tatastha shakti. So tatastha means it's in the seashore. So in the seashore, the water will come and the water will recede. The water will come forward, water will recede. So if we take the seashore as the land, as the place where it is material energy, the spiritual energy of the ocean is coming and going, the spiritual. So sometimes one suddenly experiences some kind of spiritual energy. If one wants to go in that direction, of course. If someone is totally bahirmukha, anadi bahirmukha jeev, Krishna bhuli gela, atev Krishna ved puran karila. So it is mentioned that the Vedas and Puranas are existing because, unfortunately, the living entity is, since time immemorial, looking away from Krishna. So that the living entity can start looking at Krishna, there is this Vedas and Puranas. And Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the spotless Purana, Amalam Purana. So, yeah, it is transcendental. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam shukamugad amrita drava samyatam pipatam bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhoi bhavaka. It is mentioned about Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the ripened fruit of all the Vedic literatures. So this is the fruit. One relishes the fruit, and this fruit, if it is bitten a little bit by the parrot, it becomes even more tastier, as it is said. So it is told by Shukadeva Goswami. Shuka means parrot. So it becomes even more tastier. And who muhuraho rasika bhoi bhavaka, who tastes this transcendental fruit tasted by the parrot called Shukadeva Goswami? One who is rasika. Rasika means one who enjoys the bliss of hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, totally in that blissful state of existence. So this is the transcendental position. So the living entity, so this is a tatastha Shakti. So tatastha Shakti is the marginal potency of the Lord. So the living entity can either remain within and enjoy the unlimited bliss. So that is a spiritual energy, under the control of the spiritual energy. Or the living entity can go out and then become trapped in that so-called happiness, which is actually the womb of sorrow. So this is the choice that the living entity has at every moment, and that is under the purview of the next ingredient that is mentioned here, kala. That is a time. So under the influence of the time, the living entity can choose to either remain within the spiritual energy or become entangled in the external material energy of the Lord. And when one gets entangled in the external material energy of the Lord, one is unfortunately in that state of punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jatare shayanam. As Srila Shankaracharya mentions, that one is taking birth again, and one is dying, and one is getting into the womb of different mothers. In each and every life, one is getting the womb of different mothers. So how does one come out of that? When one understands this particular verse. Dravyaṁ karma ca kālaś ca svabhāvo jīva eva ca vāsudevāt paro brahman na cānyo rtho tattvataḥ. What does it mean? It means that the 5 elementary ingredients of creation, the interaction thereof set up by eternal time, and the intuition or nature of the individual living beings are all differentiated parts and parcels of the personality of Godhead, Vāsudeva, and in truth, there is no other value in them. So as we said in the beginning, na cānyo rtho tattvataḥ, na cānyo vruneham vareshadapiha. As it is mentioned by Satyavrata Muni, it's quite similar there. There he's saying that I don't want any other boon except to be immersed in your transcendental pastimes. And here it is saying that all the other, everything that exists does not have any value unless we link it back to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because everything is actually coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, dravyaṁ karma ca kālaś ca svabhāvo jīva eva ca vāsudevāt paro brahman na cānyo rtho tattvataḥ. With this, I'd like to conclude this discussion. I'll just have a look at the comments. Pravina Hula, Hare Krishna, Kusum Kulsunge, Hare Krishna, Norman, Hare Hare, Kashish Modi, Jai Shri Krishna, Veer Kaushik, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for listening to this Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text 14. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanastu, Krishne Matirastu, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.